Welcome to the Romantic Flames audio books. Tropic of Cancer. I am living at the Villa Borghese. There is not a crumb of dirt anywhere, nor a chair misplaced. We are all alone here and we are dead. Last night Boris discovered that he was lousy. I had to shave his armpits and even then the itching did not stop. How can one get lousy in a beautiful place like this? But no matter. We might never have known each other so intimately, Boris and I, had it not been for the lice. Boris has just given me a summary of his views. He is a weather prophet. The weather will continue bad, he says. There will be more calamities, more death, more despair. Not the slightest indication of a change anywhere. The cancer of time is eating us away. Our heroes have killed themselves, or are killing themselves. The hero, then, is not time, but timelessness. We must get in step, a lockstep, toward the prison of death. There is no escape. The weather will not change. It is now the fall of my second year in Paris. I was sent here for a reason I have not yet been able to fathom. I have no money, no resources, no hopes. I am the happiest man alive. A year ago, 6 months ago, I thought that I was an artist. I no longer think about it, I am. Everything that was literature has fallen from me. There are no more books to be written, thank God. This then? This is not a book. This is libel, slander, defamation of character. This is not a book, in the ordinary sense of the word. No, this is a prolonged insult, a gob of spit in the face of art, a kick in the pants to God, man. Destiny, time, love, beauty, what you will. I am going to sing for you, a little off-key perhaps, but I will sing. I will sing while you croak, I will dance over your dirty corpse. To sing you must first open your mouth. You must have a pair of lungs, and a little knowledge of music. It is not necessary to have an accordion, or a guitar. The essential thing is to want to sing. This then is a song. I am singing. It is to you, Tanya, that I am singing. I wish that I could sing better, more melodiously, but then perhaps you would never have consented to listen to me. You have heard the others sing and they have left you cold. They sang too beautifully, or not beautifully enough. It is the 20-somethingth of October. I no longer keep track of the date. Would you say my dream of the November 14th last? There are intervals. But they are between dreams, and there is no consciousness of them left. The world around me is dissolving, leaving here and there spots of time. The world is a cancer eating itself away. I am thinking that when the great silence descends upon all and everywhere, music will at last triumph. When into the womb of time everything is again withdrawn, chaos will be restored. And chaos is the score upon which reality is written. You, Tanya, are my chaos. It is why I sing. It is not even I, it is the world dying, shedding the skin of time. I am still alive, kicking in your womb, a reality to write upon. Dozing off. The physiology of love. The whale with his 6-foot penis, in repose. The bat penis libra. Animals with a bone in the penis. Hence, a bone on. Happily, says Gourmand, the bony structure is lost in man. Happily? Yes, happily. Think of the human race walking around with a bone on. The kangaroo has a double penis, one for weekdays and one for holidays. Dozing. A letter from a female asking if I have found a title for my book. Title? To be sure, Lovely Lesbians. Your Anecdotal Life. A phrase of M. Borowski's. It is on Wednesdays that I have lunch with Borowski. His wife, who is a dried-up cow, officiates. She is studying English now. Her favorite word is filthy. You can see immediately what a pain in the ass the Borowskis are. But wait. Borowski wears corduroy suits and plays the accordion. An invincible combination, especially when you consider that he is not a bad artist. He puts on that he is a Pole. But he is not, of course. He is a Jew, Borowski. And his father was a philatelist. In fact, almost all Montparnasse is Jewish, or half-Jewish, which is worse. There's Karl and Paula, and Kronstadt, and Boris, and Tanya, and Sylvester, and Moldorf, and Lucille. All except Fillmore. Henry Jordan Oswald turned out to be a Jew also. Louis Nichols is a Jew. Even Van Norden and Cherie are Jewish. Francis Blake is a Jew, or a Jewess. Titus is a Jew. They Jews then are snowing me under. I am writing this for my friend Carl, whose father is a Jew. All this is important to understand. Of them all the loveliest Jew is Tanya, and for her sake I too would become a Jew. Why not? I already speak like a Jew. And I am as ugly as a Jew. Besides, who hates the Jews more than the Jew? Twilight hour. Indian blue. Water of glass, trees glistening and leek scent. The rails fall away into the canal at Jowers. The long caterpillar with lacquered sides dips like a roller coaster. It is not Paris. It is not Coney Island. It is a crepuscular one mélange of all the cities of Europe and Central America. The railroad yards below me. The tracks black, webby, not ordered by the engineer but cataclysmic in design. Like those gaunt fissures in the polar ice, which the camera registers in degrees of black. Food is one of the things I enjoy tremendously. And in this beautiful villa Borghese there is scarcely ever any evidence of food. It is positively appalling at times. I have asked Boris time and again to order bread for breakfast, but he always forgets. He goes out for breakfast, it seems. And when he comes back he is picking his teeth and there is a little egg hanging from his goatee. He eats in the restaurant, out of consideration for me. He says it hurts to eat a big meal and have me watch him. I like Van Norden but I do not share his opinion of himself. I do not agree. For instance, that he is a philosopher, or a thinker. He is cunt-struck, that's all. And he will never be a writer. Nor will Sylvester ever be a writer, though his name blaze in 50,000 candle power red lights. The only writers about me for whom I have any respect, at present, are Karl and Boris. They are possessed. They glow inwardly with a white name. They are mad and tone deaf. They are sufferers. Moldorf, on the other hand, who suffers too in his peculiar way, is not mad. Moldorf is word drunk. He has no veins or blood vessels, no heart or kidneys. He is a portable trunk filled with innumerable drawers, and in the drawers are labels written out in white ink, brown ink, red ink, blue ink, vermilion, saffron, mauve, sienna, apricot, turquoise, onyx, anjou, herring, corona, verdigris, 2 gorgonzola. I have moved the typewriter into the next room where I can see myself in the mirror as I write. Tanya is like Irene. She expects fat letters. But there is another Tanya, a Tanya like a big seed, who scatters pollen everywhere, or, let us say, a little bit. Of Tolstoy, 3, a stable scene in which the fetus is dug up. Tanya is a fever. 2 les votes. Urinaries. Café de la Liberté, Place des Vosges, bright neck teas on the Boulevard Montparnasse, dark bathrooms, Porto seconds, Abdullah. Cigarettes, the Adagio Sonata. Pathetic, oral amplificators, anecdotal seances, burnt sienna breasts, heavy garters, what time is it, golden pheasants stuffed with chestnuts, taffeta 5 fingers. Vaporish twilights turning to ilex, acromegaly, 6 cancer and delirium, warm veils, poker chips, carpets of blood and soft thighs. Tanya says so that everyone may hear, I love him. And while Boris scalds himself with whiskey, she says, sit down here. Oh Boris. Russia, what'll I do? I'm bursting with it. At night when I look at Boris's goatee lying on the pillow, I get hysterical. Oh, Tanya, where now is that warm cunt of yours, those fat, heavy garters, those soft, bulging thighs? There is a bone in my prick 6 inches long. I will ream out every wrinkle in your cunt, Tanya, big with seed. I will send you home to your Sylvester with an ache in your belly and your womb turned inside out. Your Sylvester. Yes, he knows how to build a fire, but I know how to inflame a cunt. I shoot hot bolts into you, Tanya, I make your ovaries incandescent. 7. Your Sylvester is a little jealous now? He feels something, does he? He feels the remnants of my big prick. I have set the shores a little wider, I have ironed out the wrinkles. After me you can take on stallions, bulls, rams, drakes, Saint Bernards. You can stuff toads, bats, lizards up your rectum. You can shit arpeggios if you like, or string a zither across your navel. I am fucking you, Tanya, so that you'll stay fucked. And if you are afraid of being fucked publicly, I will fuck you privately. I will tear off a few hairs from your cunt and paste them on Boris's chin. I will bite into your clitoris and spit out 2 franc pieces. Indigo sky swept clear of fleecy clouds, gaunt trees infinitely extended, there. Black boughs gesticulating like a sleepwalker. Somber, spectral trees, there. Trunks pale as deer ash. A silence supreme and altogether European. Shutters drawn, shops barred. A red glow here and there to mark a tryst. Brusque the facades, almost forbidding, immaculate except for the splotches of shadow cast by the trees. Passing by the orangerie I am reminded of another Paris, the Paris of Mom, of Gauguin, Paris of George Moore. I think of that terrible Spaniard who was then startling the world with his acrobatic leaps from style to style. I think of Spengler and of his terrible pronunciamentos, and I wonder if style in the grand manner, is done for. I say that my mind is occupied with these thoughts, but it is not true, it is only later, after I have crossed the Seine, after I have put behind me the carnival of lights, that I allow my mind to play with these ideas. For the moment I can think of nothing except that I am a sentient being stabbed by the miracle of these waters that reflect a forgotten world. All along the banks the trees lean heavily over the tarnished mirror. When the wind rises and fills them with a rustling murmur, they will shed a few tears and shiver as the water swirls by. I am suffocated by it. No one to whom I can communicate even a fraction of my feelings. The trouble with Irene is that she has a valise instead of a cunt. She wants fat letters to shove in her valise. Immense, avec des choses inouïes. Liana. Now, she had a cunt. I know because she sent us some hairs from down below. Liana, a wild ass snuffing pleasure out of the wind. On every high hill she played the harlot, and sometimes in telephone booths and toilets. She bought a bed for King Carol and a shaving mug with his initials on it. She lay in Tottenham Court Road with her dress pulled up and fingered herself. She used candles, Roman candles, and doorknobs. Not a prick in the land big enough for her, not one. Men went inside her and curled up. She wanted extension pricks, self-exploding rockets, hot boiling oil made of wax and creosote. She would cut off your prick and keep it inside her forever, if you gave her permission. One cunt out of a million, Liana. A laboratory cunt and no litmus paper that could take her color. She was a liar, too, this Liana. She never bought a bed for her King Carol. She crowned him with a whiskey bottle, and her tongue was full of lice and tomorrow's pool Carol. He could only curl up inside her and die. She drew a breath and he fell out like a dead clam. Enormous, fat letters, avec des choses inouïes. A valise without straps. A hole without a key. She had a German mouth, French ears, Russian ass. Cunt international. When the flag waved it was red all the way back to the throat. You entered on the Boulevard Jules Ferry and came out at the Porte de la Villette. You dropped your sweetbreads into the tumbrils, red tumbrils with two wheels, naturally. At the confluence of the Arc and Marne, where the water sluices through the dikes and lies like glass under the bridges. Liana is lying there now, and the canal is full of glass and splinters, the mimosas weep, and there is a wet, foggy fart on the window panes. One cunt out of a million, Liana. All cunt. And a glass ass in which you can read the history of the Middle Ages. It is the caricature of a man which Mulder first presents. Thyroid eyes. Michelin lips. Voice like pea soup. Under his vest he carries a little pear. However you look at him, it is always the same panorama, Netsuke snuffbox. Ivory handle, chess piece, fan, temple motif. He has fermented so long now that he is amorphous. Yeast. Despoiled of its vitamins. Vase without a rubber plant. They females were sired twice in the 9th century, and again during the Renaissance. He was carried through the great dispersions under yellow bellies and white. Long before the Exodus a totter spat in his blood. His dilemma is that of the dwarf. With his pineal eye he sees in silhouette, projected on a screen of incommensurable size, His voice, synchronized to the shadow of a pinhead, intoxicates him. He hears a roar where others hear only a squeak. There is his mind. It is an amphitheater in which the actor gives a protean performance. Moldorf, multiform and unerring, goes through his roles. Clown, juggler, contortionist, priest, lecher, mountebank. The amphitheater is too small. He puts dynamite to it. The audience is drugged. He scotches it. I am trying ineffectually to approach Moldorf. It is like trying to approach God, for Moldorf is God, he has never been anything else. I am merely putting down words. I have had opinions about him which I have discarded, I have had other opinions which I am revising. I have pinned him down only to find that it was not a dung beetle I had in my hands, but a dragonfly. He has offended me by his coarseness and then overwhelmed me with his delicacy. He has been voluble to the point of suffocation, then quiet as the Jordan. When I see him trotting forward to greet me, his little paws outstretched, his eyes perspiring, I feel that I am meeting. No, this is not the way to go about it. Come unorf dansant sur un jet d'eau. He has only one cane, a mediocre one. In his pocket scraps of paper containing prescriptions for Weltschmerz. He is cured now, and the little German girl who washed his feet is breaking her heart. It is like Mr. Non-entity toting his Gujarati dictionary everywhere. Inevitable for every one meaning, no doubt, indispensable. Borowski would find all this incomprehensible. Borowski has a different cane for each day in the week. And one for Easter. We have so many points in common that it is like looking at myself in a cracked mirror. I have been looking over my manuscripts. Pages scrawled with revisions. Pages of literature. This frightens me a little. It is so much like Moldorf. Only I am a Gentile, and Gentiles have a different way of suffering. They suffer without neuroses and, as Sylvester says, a man who has never been afflicted with a neurosis does not know the meaning of suffering. I recall distinctly how I enjoyed my suffering. It was like taking a cub to bed with you. Once in a while he clawed you and then you really were frightened. Ordinarily you had no fear, you could always turn him loose, or chop his head off. There are people who cannot resist the desire to get into a cage with wild beasts and be mangled. They go in even without revolver or whip. Fear makes them fearless. For the Jew the world is a cage filled with wild beasts. The door is locked and he is there without whip or revolver. His courage is so great that he does not even smell the dung in the corner. The spectators applaud but he does not hear. The drama, he thinks, is going on inside the cage. The cage, he thinks, is the world. Standing there alone and helpless, the door locked, he finds that the lions do not understand his language. Not one lion has ever heard of Spinoza. Spinoza? Why, they can't even get their teeth into him. Give us meat! They roar. While he stands there petrified, his ideas frozen, his Weltanschauung trapeze out of reach. A single blow of the lion's paw and his cosmogony is smashed. The lions, too, are disappointed. They expected blood, bones, gristle, sinews. They chew and chew, but the words are chicle and chicle is indigestible. Chicle is a base over which you sprinkle sugar, pepsin, thyme. Licorice. Chicle, when it is gathered by Chicleros, is okay. The Chicleros came over on the ridge of a sunken continent. They brought with them an algebraic language. In the Arizona desert they met the Mongols of the north, glazed like eggplants. Time shortly after the earth had taken its gyroscopic lean, when the Gulf Stream was parting ways with the Japanese current. In the heart of the soil they found tuferock. They embroidered the very bowels of the earth with their language. They ate one another's entrails, and the forest closed in on them, on their bones and skulls, on their lace tufa. Their language was lost. Here and there one still finds the remnants of a menagerie, a brain plate covered with figures. What has all this to do with you, Moldorf? The word in your mouth is anarchy. Say it, Moldorf, I am waiting for it. Nobody knows, when we shake hands, the rivers that pour through our sweat whilst you are framing your words, your lips half parted, the saliva gurgling in your cheeks. I have jumped halfway across Asia. Were I to take your cane, mediocre as it is, and poke a lime hole in your side, I could collect enough material to fill the British Museum. We stand on 5 minutes and devour centuries. You are the sieve through which my anarchy strains, resolves itself into words. Behind the word is chaos. Each word a stripe, a bar, but there are not and never will be enough bars to make the mesh. In my absence the window curtains have been hung. They have the appearance of Tyrolean tablecloths dipped in Lysol. The room sparkles. I sit on the bed in a daze, thinking about man. Before his birth, suddenly bells begin to toll, a weird, unearthly music, as if I had been translated to the steppes of Central Asia. Some ring out with a long, lingering roll, some erupt drunkenly, maudlinly. And now it is quiet again, except for a last note that barely grazes the silence of the night, just a faint, high gong snuffed out like a flame. I have made a silent compact with myself not to change a line of what I write. I am not interested in perfecting my thoughts, nor my actions. Beside the perfection of Turgenev I put the perfection of Dostoevsky. Is there anything more perfect than the eternal husband? Here, then, in one end, the same medium, we have two kinds of perfection. But in Van Gogh's letters there is a perfection beyond either of these. It is the triumph of the individual over art. There is only one thing which interests me vitally now, and that is the recording of all that which is omitted in books. Nobody, so far as I can see, is making use of those elements in the air which give direction and motivation to our lives. Only the killers seem to be extracting from life some satisfactory measure of what they are putting into it. The age demands violence, but we are getting only abortive explosions. Revolutions are nipped in the bud, or else succeed too quickly. Passion is quickly exhausted. Men fall back on ideas, come dehabitude. Nothing is proposed that can last more than 24 hours. We are living a million lives in the space of a generation. In the study of entomology, or of deep-sea life, or cellular activity, we derive more. The telephone interrupts this thought which I should never have been able To complete. Someone is coming to rent the apartment. It looks as though it were finished, my life at the Villa Borghese. Well, I'll take up these pages and move on. Things will happen elsewhere. Things are always happening. It seems wherever I go there is drama. People are like lice, they get under your skin and bury themselves there. You scratch and scratch until the blood comes, but you can't get permanently deloused. Everywhere I go people are making a mess of their lives. Everyone has his private tragedy. It's in the blood now: misfortune, ennui, 31 grief, suicide. The atmosphere is saturated with disaster, frustration, futility. Scratch and scratch until there's no skin left. However, the effect upon me is exhilarating. Instead of being discouraged, or depressed, I enjoy it. I am crying for more and more disasters, for bigger calamities, for grander failures. I want the whole world to be out of whack, I want everyone to scratch himself to death. So fast and furiously am I compelled to live now that there is scarcely time to record even these fragmentary notes. After the telephone call, a gentleman and his wife arrived. I went upstairs to lie down during the transaction. Lay there wondering what my next move would be. Surely not to go back to the fairy's bed and toss about all night flicking bread crumbs with my toes. That puking little bastard. If there's anything worse than being a fairy, it's being a miser. A timid, quaking little bugger who lived in constant fear of going broke someday, the 18th of March perhaps, or the 25th of May precisely. Coffee without milk or sugar. Bread without butter. Meat without gravy, or no meat at all. Without this and without that. They dirty little miser. Open the bureau drawer one day and find money hidden away in a sock. Over 2,000 francs and checks that he hadn't even cashed. Even that I wouldn't have minded so much if there weren't always coffee grounds in my beret and garbage on the floor, to say nothing of the cold cream jars and the greasy towels and the sink always stopped up. I tell you, the little bastard, he smelled bad except when he doused himself with cologne. His ears were dirty, his eyes were dirty, his ass was dirty. He was double-jointed, asthmatic, lousy, picayune, morbid. I could have forgiven him everything if only he had handed me a decent breakfast. But a man who has 2,000 francs hidden away in a dirty sock and refuses to wear a clean shirt or smear a little butter over his bread, such a man is not just a fairy, nor even just a miser, he's an imbecile. But that's neither here nor mere, about the fairy. I'm keeping an ear open as to what's going on downstairs. It's a Mr. Wren and his wife who have called to look at the apartment. They're talking about taking it. Only talking about it, thank God. Mrs. Wren has a loose laugh, complications ahead. Now Mr. Wren is talking. His voice is raucous, scraping, booming, a heavy, blunt weapon that wedges its way through flesh and bone and cartilage. Boris calls me down to be introduced. He is rubbing his hands, like a pawnbroker. They are talking about a story Mr. Wren wrote, a story about a spavined horse. But I thought Mr. Wren was a painter. To be sure, says Boris, with a twinkle in his eye, but in the wintertime he writes. And he writes well, remarkably well. I try to induce Mr. Wren to talk, to say something, anything, to talk about the spavined horse, if necessary. But Mr. Wren is almost inarticulate. When he essays to speak of those dreary months with the pen, he becomes unintelligible. Months and months he spends before setting a word to paper. And there are only 3 months of winter. What does he cogitate all those months and months of winter? So help me God, I can't see this guy as a writer. Yet Mrs. Wren says that when he sits down to it the stuff just pours out. The talk drifts. It is difficult to follow Mr. Wren's mind. Because he says nothing. He thinks as he goes along, so Mrs. Wren puts it. Mrs. Wren puts everything about Mr. Wren in the loveliest light. He thinks as he goes along very charming, charming indeed, as Borowski would say, but really very painful, particularly when the thinker is nothing but a spavined horse. Boris hands me money to buy liquor. Going for the liquor, I am already intoxicated. I know just how I'll begin when I get back to the house. Walking down the street it commences, the grand speech inside me that's gurgling. Like Mrs. Wren's loose laugh. Seems to me she had a slight edge on already. Listens beautifully when she's tight. Coming out of the wine shop I hear the urinal gurgling. Everything is loose and splashy. I want Mrs. Wren to listen. Boris is rubbing his hands again. Mr. Wren is still stuttering and spluttering. I have a bottle between my legs and I'm shoving the corkscrew in. Immerse. Wren has her mouth parted expectantly. The wine is splashing between my legs, the sun is splashing through the bay window, and inside my veins there is a bubble and splash of 1,000 crazy things that commence to gush out of me now pell-mell. 34 I'm telling them everything that comes to mind. Everything that was bottled up inside me and which Mrs. Wren's loose laugh has somehow released. With that bottle between my legs and the sun splashing through the window, I experience once again the splendor of those miserable days when I first arrived in Paris, a bewildered, poverty-stricken individual who haunted the streets like a ghost at a banquet. Everything comes back to me in a rush: the toilets that wouldn't work, the prince who shined my shoes, the cinema splendide where I slept on the patron's overcoat, the bars in the window, the feeling of suffocation, the fat cockroaches, the drinking and carousing that went on between times. Rose Kanaki and Naples dying in the sunlight. Dancing the streets on an empty belly, and now and then calling on strange people. Madame Delorme, for instance. How I ever got to Madame Delorme's, I can't imagine any more. But I got there, got inside somehow, past the butler, past the maid with her little white apron, got right inside the palace with my corduroy trousers and my hunting jacket and not a button on my fly. Even now I can taste again the golden ambience of that room where Madame Delorme sat upon a throne in her mannish rig, the goldfish in the bowls, the maps of the ancient world, the beautifully bound books. I can feel again her heavy hand resting upon my shoulder, frightening me a little with her heavy lesbian air. More comfortable down below in that thick stew pouring into the Gare Saint Lazare. The whores in the doorways, seltzer bottles on every table, a thick tide of semen flooding the gutters. Nothing better, between 5 and 7 then. To be pushed around in that throng, to follow a leg or a beautiful bust, to move along with the tide and everything whirling in your brain. A weird sort of contentment in those days. No appointments, no invitations for dinner. No program, No dough. The golden period, when I had not a single friend. Each morning the dreary walk to the American Express, and each morning the inevitable answer from the clerk. Dashing here and there like a bedbug, gathering butts now and then, sometimes furtively, sometimes brazenly. Sitting down on a bench and squeezing my guts to stop the gnawing, or walking through the Jardin des Tuileries and getting an erection looking at the dumb statues. Or wandering along the Seine at night. Wandering, and going mad with the beauty of it, the trees leaning to, the broken images in the water, the rush of the current under the bloody lights of the bridges, the women sleeping in doorways, sleeping on newspapers, sleeping in the rain, everywhere the musty porches of the cathedrals and beggars and lice and old hags full of St. Vitus dance. Pushcarts stacked up like wine barrels in the side streets, the smell of berries in the marketplace and the old church surrounded with vegetables and blue arc lights, the gutters slippery with garbage and women in satin pumps staggering through the filth and vermin at the end of an all-night souse. The place Saint Sulpice, so quiet and deserted, where toward midnight there came every night the woman with the busted umbrella and the crazy veil. Every night she slept there on a bench under her torn umbrella, the ribs hanging down, her dress turning green, her bony fingers and the odor of decay oozing from her body, and in the morning I'd be sitting there myself, taking a quiet snooze in the sunshine, cursing the god-damned pigeons gathering up the crumbs everywhere. Saint Sulpice. The fat belfries, the garish posters over the door, the candles flaming inside. The square so beloved of Anatole France, with that drone and buzz from the altar, the splash of the fountain, the pigeons cooing, the crumbs disappearing like magic and only a dull rumbling in the hollow of the guts. Here I would sit day after day thinking of Germaine and that dirty little street near the Bastille where she lived, and that buzz going on behind the altar, the buses whizzing by, the sun beating down into the asphalt and the asphalt working into me and Germaine, into the asphalt and all Paris in the big fat belfries. And it was down the Rue Bonaparte that only a year before Mona and I used to walk every night, after we had taken leave of Borowski. Saint Sulpice not meaning much to me then, nor anything in Paris. Washed out with talk. Sick of faces. Fed up with cathedrals and squares and menageries and what not. Picking up a book in the red bedroom and the cane chair uncomfortable. Tired of sitting on my ass all day long, tired of red wallpaper, tired of seeing so many people jabbering away about nothing. The red bedroom and the trunk always open, her gowns lying about in a delirium of disorder. The red bedroom with my goloshes and canes, the notebooks I never touched, the manuscripts lying cold and dead. Paris. Meaning the café. Select, the dome. The flea market. The American Express. Paris. Meaning Borowski's canes, Borowski's hats, Borowski's gouaches. Borowski's prehistoric fish and prehistoric jokes. In that Paris of 28 only. One night stands out in my memory, the night before sailing for America. A rare night, with Borowski slightly pickled and a little disgusted with me. Because I'm dancing with every slut in the place. But we're leaving in the morning. That's what I tell every cunt I grab hold of, leaving in the morning. That's what I'm telling the blonde with agate-colored eyes. And while I'm telling her, she takes my hand and squeezes it between her legs. In The lavatory I stand before the bowl with a tremendous erection, it seems. Light and heavy at the same time, like a piece of lead with wings on it. And while I'm standing there like that, two cunts sail in Americans. I greet them cordially, prick in hand. They give me a wink and pass on. In the vestibule, as I'm buttoning my fly, I notice one of them waiting for her friend to come out of the can. The music is still playing and maybe Mona'll be coming to fetch me, or Borowski with his gold-knobbed cane, but I'm in her arms now. And she has hold of me and I don't care who comes or what happens. We wriggle into the cabinet and there I stand her up, slap up against the wall. And I try to get it into her but it won't work, and so we sit down on the seat and try it that way, but it won't work either. No matter how we try it, it won't work. And all the while she's got hold of my prick, she's clutching it like a lifesaver, but it's no use, we're too hot, too eager. The music is still playing. And so we waltz out of the cabinet into the vestibule again, and as we're dancing there in the shithouse I come all over her beautiful gown and she's sore as hell about it. I stumble back to the table and there's Borowski with his ruddy face and Mona with her disapproving eye. And Borowski says, "Let's all go to Brussels tomorrow," and we agree, and when we get back to the hotel I vomit all over the place, in the bed, in the washbowl, over the suits and gowns and the galoshes and canes and the notebooks I never touched and the manuscripts lying cold and dead. A few months later. The same hotel, the same room. We look out on the courtyard where the bicycles are parked, and there is the little room up above, under the attic, where some smart young Ali played the phonograph all day long and repeated clever little things at the top of his voice. I say we, but I'm getting ahead of myself, because Mona has been away a long time and it's just today that I'm meeting her at the Gare St. Lazare. Toward evening I'm standing there with my face squeezed between the bars, but there's no Mona, and I read the cable over again but it doesn't help any. I go back to the quarter and just the same I put away a hearty meal. Strolling past the dome and a little later suddenly I see a pale, heavy face and burning eyes and the little velvet suit that I always adored. Because under the soft velvet there were always her warm breasts, the marble legs, cool, firm, muscular. She rises up out of a sea of faces and embraces me passionately, 1,000 eyes, noses, fingers, legs, bottles, windows, purses, saucers all glaring at us and we in each other's arms oblivious. I sit down beside her and she talks a flood of talk. Wild consumptive notes of hysteria, perversion, leprosy. I hear not a word. Because she is beautiful and I love her and now I am happy and willing to die. We walk down the Rue du Château, looking for Eugene. Walk over the railroad bridge where I used to watch the trains pulling out and feel all sick inside, wondering where the hell she could be. Everything soft and enchanting as we walk over the bridge. Smoke coming up between our legs. The tracks creaking, semaphores in our blood. I feel her body close to mine. All mine now, and I stop to rub my hands over the warm velvet. Everything around us is crumbling, and the warm body under the warm velvet is aching for me. Back in the very same room and 50 francs to the good, thanks to Eugene / I look out on the court but the phonograph is silent. The trunk is open and her things are lying around everywhere just as before. She lies down on the bed with her clothes on. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. I'm afraid she'll go mad, in bed, under the blankets. How good to feel her body again. But for how long? Will it last this time? Already I have a presentiment that it won't. She talks to me so feverishly as if there will be no tomorrow. Be quiet, Mona. Just look at me, don't talk. Finally she drops off and I pull my arm from under her. My eyes close. Her body is there beside me, it will be there till morning surely. It was in February I pulled out of the harbor in a blinding snowstorm. The last glimpse I had of her was in the window waving goodbye to me. A man standing on the other side of the street, at the corner, his hat pulled down over his eyes, his jowls resting on his lapels. A fetus watching me. A fetus with a cigar in its mouth. Mona at the window waving goodbye. White, heavy face, hair streaming wild. And now it is a heavy bedroom, breathing regularly through the gills, sap still oozing from between her legs, a warm feline odor and her hair in my mouth. My eyes are closed. We breathe warmly into each other's mouth. Close together, America 3000 miles away. I never want to see it again. To have her here in bed with me, breathing on me, her hair in my mouth, I count that something of a miracle. Nothing can happen now till morning. I wake from a deep slumber to look at her. A pale light is trickling in. I look at her beautiful wild hair. I feel something crawling down my neck. I look at her again, closely. Her hair is alive. I pull back the sheet. More of them. They are swarming over the pillow. It is a little after daybreak. We pack hurriedly and sneak out of the hotel. The cafes are still closed. We walk, and as we walk we scratch ourselves. The day opens in milky whiteness, streaks of salmon pink sky, snails leaving their shells. Paris. Paris. Everything happens here. Old crumbling walls and the pleasant sound of water running in the urinals. Men licking their mustaches at the bar. Shutters going up with a bang and little streams purling in the gutters. Aimer pickin' in huge scarlet letters. Zigzag. Which way will we go and why or where or what? Mona is hungry, her dress is thin. Nothing but evening wraps, bottles of perfume, barbaric earrings, bracelets, depilatories. We sit down in a billiard parlor on the Avenue du Maine and order hot coffee. The toilet is out of order. We shall have to sit some time before we can go to another hotel. Meanwhile we pick bed bugs out of each other's hair. Nervous. Mona is losing her temper. Must have a bath. Must have this. Must have that. Must. How much money have you left? Money. Forgot all about that. Hotel des Etats Unis. An ascenseur. We go to bed in broad daylight. When we get up it is dark and the first thing to do is to raise enough dough to send a cable to America. A cable to the fetus with the long juicy cigar in his mouth. Meanwhile there is the Spanish woman on the Boulevard Raspail. She's always good for a warm meal. By morning something will happen. At least we're going to bed together. No more bed bugs now. The rainy season has commenced. The sheets are immaculate. A new life opening up for me at the Villa Borghese. Only 10 o'clock and we have already had breakfast and been out for a walk. We have an Elsa here with us now. Step softly for a few days, cautions Boris. The day begins gloriously, a bright sky, a fresh wind, the house is newly washed. On our way to the post office, Boris and I discussed the book. The last book, which is going to be written anonymously. A new day is beginning. I felt it this morning as we stood before one of Dufresne's glistening canvases, a sort of déjeuner intimé in the 13th century. Sans Ven. A fine, fleshy nude, solid, vibrant, pink as a fingernail, with glistening billows of flesh, all the secondary characteristics, and a few of the primary. A body that sings, that has the moisture of dawn. A still life, only. Nothing is still, nothing dead here. The table creaks with food, it is so heavy. It is sliding out of the frame. A 13th century repast with all the jungle notes that he has memorized so well. A family of gazelles and zebras nipping the fronds 40 of the palms. And now we have Elsa. She was playing for us this morning while we were in bed. Step softly for a few days. Good. Elsa is the maid and I am the guest. And Boris is the big cheese. A new drama is beginning. I'm laughing too myself as I write this. He knows what is going to happen, that lynx, Boris. He has a nose for things too. Step softly. Boris is on pins and needles. At any moment now his wife may appear on the scene. She weighs well over 180 pounds, that wife of his. And Boris is only a handful. There you have the situation. He tries to explain it to me on our way home at night. It is so tragic and so ridiculous at the same time that I am obliged to stop now and then and laugh in his face. Why do you laugh? So, he says gently, and then he commences himself, with that whimpering, hysterical note in his voice, like a helpless wretch who realizes suddenly that no matter how many frock coats he puts on he will never make a man. He wants to run away, to take a new name. She can have everything, that cow. If only she leaves me alone, he whines. But first the apartment has to be rented, and the deeds signed, and 1,000 other details for which his frock coat will come in handy. But the size of her, that's what really worries him. If we were to find her suddenly standing on the doorstep when we arrive he would faint, that's how much he respects her. And so we've got to go easy with Elsa for a while. Elsa is only there to make breakfast and to show the apartment. But Elsa is already undermining me. That German blood. Those melancholy songs. Coming down the stairs this morning, with the fresh coffee in my nostrils, I was humming softly. Es. War so Shan Joasen. For breakfast, that. And in a little while the English boy upstairs with his bock. As Elsa says he needs a woman. And Elsa needs something too. I can feel it. I didn't say anything to Boris about it, but while he was cleaning his teeth this morning Elsa was giving me an earful. About Berlin, about the women who look so attractive from behind, and when they turn round, wow, syphilis. It seems to me that Elsa looks at me rather wistfully. Something left over from the breakfast table. This afternoon we were writing, back to back, in the studio. She had begun a letter to her lover who is in Italy. The machine got jammed. Boris had gone to look at a cheap room he will take as soon as the apartment is rented. There was nothing for it but to make love to Elsa. She wanted it. And yet I felt a little sorry for her. She had only written the first line to her lover. I read it out of the corner of my eye as I bent over her. But it couldn't be helped. That damned German music, so melancholy. So sentimental. It undermined me. And then her beady little eyes, so hot. And sorrowful at the same time. After it was over I asked her to play something for me. She's a musician. Elsa, even though it sounded like broken pots and skulls clanking. She was weeping, too, as she played. I don't blame her. Everywhere the same thing. She says. Everywhere a man, and then she has to leave, and then there's an abortion and then a new job and then another man and nobody gives a fuck about her except to use her. All this after she's played Schumann for me. Schumann, that slobbery, sentimental German bastard. Somehow I feel sorry as hell for her and yet I don't give a damn. A cunt who can play as she does ought to have better sense than be tripped up by every guy with a big puts who happens to come along. But that Schumann gets into my blood. She's still sniffling, Elsa, but my mind is far away. I'm thinking of Tanya and how she claws away at her adagio. I'm thinking of lots of things that are gone and buried. Thinking of a summer afternoon in Greenpoint when the Germans were romping over Belgium and we had not yet lost enough money to be concerned over the rape of a neutral country. A time when we were still innocent enough to listen to poets and to sit around a table in the twilight rapping for departed spirits. All that afternoon and evening the atmosphere is saturated with German music, the whole neighborhood is German, more German even than Germany. We were brought up on Schumann and Hugo Wolf and sauerkraut and Kümmel and potato dumplings. Toward evening we're sitting around a big table with the curtains drawn. And some fool two-headed wench is rapping for Jesus Christ. We're holding hands under the table and the dame next to me has 2 fingers in my fly. And finally, we lie on the floor, behind the piano, while someone sings a dreary song. The air is stifling and her breath is boozy. The pedal is moving up and down, stiffly, automatically, a crazy, futile movement, like a tower of dung that takes 27 years to build but keeps perfect time. I pull her over me with the sounding board in my ears. The room is dark and the carpet is sticky with the Kümmel that has been spilled about. Suddenly it seems as if the dawn were coming, it is like water purling over ice and the ice is blue with a rising mist, glaciers sunk in emerald green. Chamois and antelope, golden. Groupers, sea cows mooshing along. And the amberjack leaping over the Arctic rim. Elsa is sitting in my lap. Her eyes are like little belly buttons. I look at her large mouth, so wet and glistening. And I cover it. She is humming now. Es war so schön Joasen. Ah! Elsa, you don't know yet what that means to me, your Trompeter von Sackingen. German singing societies, Schwabenhall, the Turnverein. Linksum, Rexum, and then a whack over the ass with the end of a rope. Ah, the Germans. They take you all over like an omnibus. They give you indigestion. In the same night one cannot visit the morgue, the infirmary, the zoo, the signs of the zodiac, the limbos of philosophy, the caves of epistemology, the arcana of Freud and Stekel. On the merry-go-round, one doesn't get anywhere, whereas with the Germans one can go from Vega to Lope de Vega, all in one night, and come away as foolish as Parsifal. As I say, the day began gloriously. It was only this morning that I became conscious again of this physical Paris of which I have been unaware for weeks. Perhaps it is because the book has begun to grow inside me. I am carrying it around with me everywhere. I walk through the streets big with child and the cops escort me across the street. Women get up to offer me their seats. Nobody pushes me rudely anymore. I am pregnant. I waddle awkwardly, my big stomach pressed against the weight of the world. It was this morning, on our way to the post office, that we gave the book its final imprimatur. We have evolved a new cosmogony of literature. Boris and I. It is to be a new Bible, the last book. All those who have anything to say will say it here anonymously. We will exhaust the age. After us not another book, not for a generation, at least. Heretofore we had been digging in the dark, with nothing but instinct to guide us. Now we shall have a vessel in which to pour the vital fluid, a bomb which, when we throw it, will set off the world. We shall put into it enough to give the writers of tomorrow their plots, their dramas, their poems, their myths, their sciences. The world will be able to feed on it for 1,000 years to come. It is colossal in its pretentiousness. The thought of it almost shatters us. For 100 years or more the world, our world, has been dying. And not one man, in these last 100 years or so, has been crazy enough to put a bomb up the asshole of creation and set it off. The world is rotting away, dying piecemeal. But it needs the coup de grace, it needs to be blown to smithereens. Not one of us is intact, and yet we have in us all the continents, and the seas between the continents and the birds of the air. We are going to put it down, the evolution of this world which has died but which has not been buried. We are swimming on the face of time, and all else has drowned, is drowning, or will drown. It will be enormous, the book. There will be oceans of space in which to move about, to perambulate, to sing, to dance, to climb, to bathe, to leap somersaults, to whine, to rape, to murder. A cathedral, a veritable cathedral, in the building of which everybody will assist who has lost his identity. There will be masses for the dead, prayers, confessions, hymns, a moaning and a chattering, a sort of murderous insouciance. There will be rose windows and gargoyles and acolytes and pallbearers. You can bring your horses in a gallop through the aisles. You can butt your head against the walls, they won't give. You can pray in any language you choose, or you can curl up outside and go to sleep. It will last 1,000 years, at least, this cathedral, and there will be no replica, for the builders will be dead and the formula too. We will have postcards made and organized tours. We will build a town around it and set up a free commune. We have no need for genius, genius is dead. We have need for strong hands, for spirits who are willing to give up the ghost and put on flesh. The day is moving along at a fine tempo. I am up on the balcony at Tanya's place. The drama is going on down below in the drawing room. They Dramatist is sick and from above his scalp looks more scabrous than ever. His hair is made of straw. His ideas are straw. His wife too is straw, though still a little damp. The whole house is made of straw. Here I am up on the balcony, waiting for Boris to arrive. My last problem breakfast is gone. I have simplified everything. If there are any new problems I can carry them in my rucksack, along with my dirty wash. I am throwing away all my sous. What need have I for money? I am a writing machine. The last screw has been added. The thing flows. Between me and the machine there is no estrangement. I am the machine. They have not told me yet what the new drama is about, but I can sense it. They are trying to get rid of me. Yet here I am for my dinner, even a little earlier than they expected. I have informed them where to sit, what to do. I ask them politely if I shall be disturbing them, but what I really mean, and they know it well, is will you be disturbing me? No, you blissful cockroaches, you are not disturbing me. You are nourishing me. I see you sitting there close together and I know there is a chasm between you. Your nearness is the nearness of planets. I am the void between you. If I withdraw, there will be no void for you to swim in. Tanya is in a hostile mood, I can feel it. She resents my being filled with anything but herself. She knows by the very caliber of my excitement that her value is reduced to zero. She knows that I did not come this evening to fertilize her. She knows there is something germinating inside me which will destroy her. She is slow to realize, but she is realizing it. Sylvester looks more content. He will embrace her this evening at the dinner table. Even now he is reading my manuscript, preparing to inflame my ego, to set my ego against hers. It will be a strange gathering this evening. The stage is being set. I hear the tinkle of the glasses. The wine is being brought out. There will be bumpers. Dowd and Sylvester, who is ill, will come out of his illness. It was only last night, at Kronstadt's, that we projected this setting. It was ordained that the women must suffer, that off stage there should be more terror and violence, more disasters, more suffering, more woe and misery. It is no accident that propels people like us to Paris. Paris is simply an artificial stage, a revolving stage that permits the spectator to glimpse all phases of the conflict. Of itself Paris initiates no dramas. They are begun elsewhere. Paris is simply an obstetrical instrument that tears the living embryo from the womb and puts it in the incubator. Paris is the cradle of artificial births. Rocking here in the cradle, each one slips back into his soil. One dreams back to Berlin, New York, Chicago, Vienna, Minsk. Vienna is never more Vienna than in Paris. Everything is raised to apotheosis. The cradle gives up its babes and new ones take their places. You can read here on the walls where Zola lived and Balzac and Dante and Strindberg and everybody who ever was anything. Everyone has lived here some time or other. Nobody dies here. They are talking downstairs. Their language is symbolic. The word struggle enters into it. Sylvester, the sick dramatist, is saying, I am just reading the manifesto. And Tanya says, whose? Yes, Tanya, I heard you. I am up here writing about you and you divine it well. Speak more, that I may record you. For when we go to table I shall not be able to make any notes. Suddenly, Tanya remarks, there is no prominent hall in this place. Now what does that mean, if anything? They are putting up pictures now. That, too, is to impress me. See, they wish to say, we are at home here, living the conjugal life. Making the home attractive. We will even argue a little about the pictures, for your benefit. And Tanya remarks again, how the eye deceives one. Ah, Tanya, what things you say! Go on, carry out this farce a little longer. I am here to get the dinner you promised me. I enjoy this comedy tremendously. And now, Sylvester takes the lead. He is trying to explain one of Borowski's gouaches. Come here, do you see? One of them is playing the guitar, the other is holding a girl in his lap. True, Sylvester. Very true. Borowski and his guitars. The girls in his lap. Only one never quite knows what it is he holds in his lap. Or whether it is really a man playing the guitar. Soon Moldorf will be trotting in on all fours and Boris with that helpless little laugh of his. There will be a golden pheasant for dinner and Anjou and short fat cigars. And Kronstadt, when he gets the latest news, will live a little harder, a little brighter, for 5 minutes, and then he will subside again into the humus of his ideology and perhaps a poem will be born, a big golden bell of a poem without a tongue. Had to knock off for an hour or so. Another customer to look at the apartment. Upstairs the bloody Englishman is practicing his Bach. It is imperative now, when someone comes to look at the apartment, to run upstairs and ask the pianist to lay off for a while. Elsa is telephoning the greengrocer. The plumber is putting a new seat on the toilet bowl. Whenever the doorbell rings Boris loses his equilibrium. In the excitement he has dropped his glasses, he is on his hands and knees. His frock coat is dragging the floor. It is a little like the Grand Guignol the starving poet come to give the butcher's daughter lessons. Every time the phone rings the poet's mouth waters. Mallarmé sounds like a sirloin steak. Victor Hugo like foie de veau. Elsa is ordering a delicate little lunch for Boris, a nice juicy little pork chop, she says. I see a whole flock of pink hams lying cold on the marble, wonderful hams. Cushioned in white fat. I have a terrific hunger. Though we've only had breakfast a few minutes ago, it's the lunch that I'll have to skip. It's only Wednesdays that I eat lunch, thanks to Borowski. Elsa is still telephoning. She forgot to order a piece of bacon. Yes, a nice little piece of bacon. Not too fatty, she says. Zoot allors. Throw in some sweetbreads, throw in some mountain oysters and some PSST clams. Throw in some fried liverwurst while you're at it. I could gobble up the 1500 plays of Lope de Vega in one sitting. It is a beautiful woman who has come to look at the apartment. An American, of course. I stand at the window, with my back to her, watching a sparrow pecking at a fresh turd. Amazing how easily the sparrow is provided for. It is raining a bit and the drops are very big. I used to think a bird couldn't fly if its wings got wet. Amazing how these rich dames come to Paris and find all the swell studios a little talent and a big purse. If it rains they have a chance to display their brand. New slickers. Food is nothing. Sometimes they're so busy giddying about that they haven't time for lunch. Just a little sandwich, a wafer, at the Café de la Paix or the Ritz bar. For the daughters of gentlefolk only, that's what it says at the old studio of Puvis de Chavannes. Happened to pass there the other day. Rich American cunts with paint boxes slung over their shoulders. A little talent. And a fat purse. The sparrow is hopping frantically from one cobblestone to another. Truly Herculean efforts, if you stop to examine closely. Everywhere there is food. Lying about in the gutter, I mean. The beautiful American woman is inquiring about the toilet. The toilet. Let me show you, you velvet snoot gazelle. The toilet, you say? Parici, madam. En n'oubliez pas que les places. Numéros sont reserves auxiliary mutuels de la guerre. Boris is rubbing his hands. He is putting the finishing touches to the deal. The dogs are barking in the courtyard, they bark like wolves. Upstairs Mrs. Melverness is moving the furniture around. She had nothing to do all day. She's bored. If she finds a crumb of dirt anywhere she cleans the whole house. There's a bunch of green grapes on the table and a bottle of wine. Vin de choix, 10 degrees. Yes, says Boris, I could make a washstand for you. Just come here, please. Yes, this is the toilet. There is one upstairs too. Of course. Yes, 1,000 francs a month. You don't care much for Utrillo. You say? No, this is it. It needs a new washer, that's all. She's going in a minute now. Boris hasn't even introduced me this time. They. Son of a bitch. Whenever it's a rich cunt he forgets to introduce me. In a few minutes I'll be able to sit down again and type. Somehow I don't feel like it anymore today. My spirit is dribbling away. She may come back in an hour or so and take the chair from under my ass. How the hell can a man write when he doesn't know where he's going to sit the next half hour? If this rich bastard takes the place I won't even have a place to sleep. It's hard to know, when you're in such a jam, which is worse, not having a place to sleep or not having a place to work. One can sleep almost anywhere, but one must have a place to work. Even if it's not a masterpiece you're doing. Even a bad novel requires a chair to sit on and a bit of privacy. These rich cunts never think of a thing like that. Whenever they want to lower their soft behinds, there's always a chair standing ready for them. Last night we left Sylvester and his god sitting together before the hearth. Sylvester in his pajamas, Moldorf with a cigar between his lips. Sylvester is peeling an orange. He puts the peel on the couch cover. Moldorf draws closer to him. He asks permission to read again that brilliant parody, The Gates of Heaven. We are getting ready to go, Boris and I. We are too gay for this sick room atmosphere. Tanya is going with us. She is gay because she is going to escape. Boris is gay because the god in Moldorf is dead. I am gay because it is another act we are going to put on. Moldorf's voice is reverent. Can I stay with you, Sylvester, until you go to bed? He has been staying with him for the last 6 days, buying medicine, running errands for Tanya. Comforting, consoling, guarding the portals against malevolent intruders. Like Boris and his scallywags. He is like a savage who has discovered that his idol was mutilated during the night. There he sits, at the idol's feet, with breadfruit and grease and Jabberwocky prayers. His voice goes out unctuously. His limbs are already paralyzed. To Tanya he speaks as if she were a priestess who had broken her vows. You must make yourself worthy. Sylvester is your god. And while Sylvester is upstairs suffering, he has a little wheeze in the chest, the priest and the priestess devour the food. You are polluting yourself, he says, the gravy dripping from his lips. He has the capacity for eating and suffering at the same time. While he fends off the dangerous ones, he puts out his fat little paw and strokes Tanya's hair. I am beginning to fall in love with you. You are like my Fanny. In other respects it has been a fine day for Moldorf. A letter arrived from America. Mo is getting A's in everything. Murray is learning to ride the bicycle. The Victrola was repaired. You can see from the expression on his face that there were other things in the letter besides report cards and velocipedes. You can be sure of it because this afternoon he bought 325 francs worth of jewelry for his Fanny. In addition he wrote her a 20-page letter. The garçon brought him page after page, filled his fountain pen, served his coffee and cigars, fanned him a little when he perspired, brushed the crumbs from the table, lit his cigar. When it went out, bought stamps for him, danced on him, pirouetted, salaamed, broke his spine damned near. The tip was fat. Bigger and fatter than a corona. Moldorf probably mentioned it in his diary. It was for Fanny's sake. The bracelet and the earrings, they were worth every sou. He spent. Better to spend it on Fanny than waste it on little strumpets like Germaine and Odette. Yes, he told Tanya so. He showed her his trunk. It is crammed with gifts for Fanny, and for Mo and Murray. My Fanny is the most intelligent woman in the world. I have been searching and searching to find a flaw in her, but there's not one. She's perfect. I'll tell you what Fanny can do. She plays bridge like a shark. She's interested in Zionism. You give her an old hat, for instance, and see what she can do with it. A little twist here, a ribbon there, and voila quelque chose de beau. Do you know what is perfect bliss? To sit beside Fanny, when Mo and Murray have gone to bed, and listen to the radio. She sits there so peacefully. I am rewarded for all my struggles and heartaches in just watching her. She listens intelligently. When I think of your stinking Montparnasse and then of my evenings in Bay Ridge with Fanny after a big meal, I tell you there is no comparison. A simple thing like food, the children, the soft lamps, and Fanny sitting there, a little tired, but cheerful. Contented, heavy with bread, we just sit there for hours without saying a word. That's bliss. Today she writes me a letter, not one of those dull stock report letters. She writes me from the heart, in language that even my little Murray could understand. She's delicate about everything, Fanny. She says that the children must continue their education, but the expense worries her. It will cost $1,000 to send little Murray to school. Mo, of course, will get a scholarship. But little Murray, that little genius, Murray, what are we going to do about him? I wrote Fanny not to worry. Send Murray to school. I said. What's another $1,000? I'll make more money this year than ever before. I'll do it for little Murray because he's a genius, that kid. I should like to be there when Fanny opens the trunk. See, Fanny, this is what I bought in Budapest from an old Jew. This is what they wear in Bulgaria. It's pure wool. This belonged to the Duke of something or other. No, you don't wind it, you put it in the sun. This I want you to wear, Fanny. When we go to the opera, wear it with that comb I showed you. And this, Fanny, is something Tanya picked up for me, she's a little bit on your type. And Fanny is sitting there on the settee, just as she was in the oleograph. With Mo on one side of her and little Murray, Murray the genius, on the other. Her fat legs are a little too short to reach the floor. Her eyes have a dull permanganate glow. Breasts like ripe red cabbage, they bobble a little when she leans forward. But the sad thing about her is that the juice has been cut off. She sits there like a dead storage battery, her face is out of plumb. It needs a little animation, a sudden spurt of juice to bring it back into focus. Moldorf is jumping around in front of her like a fat toad. His flesh quivers. He slips and it is difficult for him to roll over again on his belly. She prods him with her thick toes. His eyes protrude a little further. Kick me again, Fanny, that was good. She gives him a good prod. This time it leaves a permanent dent in his paunch. His face is close to the carpet, the waddles are joggling in the nap of the rug. He livens up a bit, flips around, springs from furniture to furniture. Fanny, you are marvelous. He is sitting now on her shoulder. He bites a little piece from her ear, just a little tip from the lobe where it doesn't hurt. But she's still dead, all storage battery and no juice. He falls on her lap and lies there quivering like a toothache. He is all warm now and helpless. His belly glistens like a patent leather shoe. In the sockets of his eyes a pair of fancy vest buttons. Unbutton my eyes, Fanny. I want to see you better. Fanny carries him to bed and drops a little hot wax over his eyes. She puts rings around his navel and a thermometer up his ass. She places him and he quivers again. Suddenly he's dwindled, shrunk, completely out of sight. She searches all over for him, in her intestines. Everywhere. Something is tickling her, she doesn't know where exactly. The bed is full of toads and fancy vest buttons. Fanny, where are you? Something is tickling her, she can't say where. The buttons are dropping off the bed. The toads are climbing the walls. A tickling and a tickling. Fanny, take the wax out of my eyes. I want to look at you. But Fanny is laughing, squirming with laughter. There is something inside her, tickling and tickling. She'll die laughing if she doesn't find it. Fanny, the trunk is full of beautiful things. Fanny, do you hear me? Fanny is laughing, laughing like a fat worm. Her belly is swollen with laughter. Her legs are getting blue. Oh God, Morris, there is something tickling me. I can't help it. Sunday. Left the Villa Borghese a little before noon, just as Boris was getting ready to sit down to lunch. I left out of a sense of delicacy, because it really Pains Boris to see me sitting there in the studio with an empty belly. Why? He doesn't invite me to lunch with him, I don't know. He says he can't afford it, but that's no excuse. Anyway, I'm delicate about it. If it pains him to eat alone in my presence, it would probably pain him more to share his meal with me. It's not my place to pry into his secret affairs. Dropped in at the Kronstadts and they were eating too. A young chicken with wild rice. Pretended that I had eaten already, but I could have torn the chicken from the baby's hands. This is not just false modesty, it's a kind of perversion, I'm thinking. Twice they asked me if I wouldn't join them. No. No. Wouldn't even accept a cup of coffee after the meal. I'm delicate, I am. On the way out I cast a lingering glance at the bones lying on the baby's plate. There was still meat on them. Prowling around aimlessly. A beautiful day so far. The Rue de Bussy is alive. Crawling. The bars wide open and the curbs lined with bicycles. All the meat and vegetable markets are in full swing. Arms loaded with truck, bandaged in newspapers. A fine Catholic Sunday. In the morning, at least. High noon and here I am. Standing on an empty belly at the confluence of all these crooked lanes that reek with the odor of food. Opposite me is the Hotel de Louisiana. A grim old hostelry known to the bad boys of the Rue de Bussy in the good old days. Hotels and food, and I'm walking about like a leper with crabs gnawing at my entrails. On Sunday mornings there's a fever in the streets. Nothing like it anywhere, except perhaps on the east side, or down around Chatham Square. The Rue de l'Échat is seething. The streets twist and turn, at every angle a fresh hive of activity. Long queues of people with vegetables under their arms, turning in here and there with crisp, sparkling appetites. Nothing but food, food, food. Makes one delirious. Pass the Square de Furstenberg. Looks different now, at high noon. The other night when I passed by it was deserted, bleak, spectral. In the middle of the square 4 black trees that have not yet begun to blossom. Intellectual trees, nourished by the paving stones. Like T.S. Eliot's verse. Here, by God, if Marie-Laurent Sand 66 ever brought her lesbians out into the open, would be the place for them to commune. Trace lesbian ID. Sterile, hybrid, dry as Boris 67 heart. In the little garden adjoining the Église Saint-Germain are a few dismounted gargoyles. Monsters that jut forward with a terrifying plunge. On the benches other monsters, old people, idiots, cripples, epileptics. Snoozing quietly, waiting for the dinner bell to ring. At the gallery Zack across the way, some imbecile has made a picture of the cosmos on the flat. A painter's cosmos. Full of odds and ends, bric-a-brac. In the lower left-hand corner, however, there's an anchor and a dinner bell. Salute. Salute, oh! Cosmos. Still prowling around. Mid-afternoon. Guts. Rattling. Beginning to rain now. Notre Dame rises tomb-like from the water. They gargoyles lean far out over the lace facade. They hang there like an idée fixe in the mind of a monomaniac. An old man with yellow whiskers approaches me. Has some Jaworski nonsense in his hand. Comes up to me with his head thrown back and the rain splashing in his face turns the golden sands to mud. Book store with some of Raoul Dufy's 69 drawings in the window. Drawings of char women with rose bushes between their legs. A treatise on the philosophy of Joan Miro. The philosophy, mind you. In the same window, a man cut in slices. Chapter 1, The Man in the Eyes of His Family. Chapter 2, The Same in the Eyes of His Mistress. Chapter 3-No Chapter 3. Have to come back tomorrow for chapters 3 and 4. Every day the window trimmer turns a fresh page. A man cut in slices. You can't imagine how furious I am not to have thought of a title like that. Where is this bloke who writes the same in the eyes of his mistress, the same in the eyes of the same? Where is this guy? Who is he? I want to hug him. I wish to Christ I had had brains enough to think of a title like that instead of Crazy Cock and the other fool things I invented. Well, fuck a duck. I congratulate him just the same. I wish him luck with his fine title. Here's another slice for you for your next book. Ring me up some day. I'm living at the Villa Borghese. We're all dead. Or dying, or about to die. We need good titles. We need meat slices and slices of meat, juicy tenderloins, porterhouse steaks, kidneys, mountain oysters, sweetbreads. Someday, when I'm standing at the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway, I'm going to remember this title and I'm going to put down everything that goes on in my noodle: caviar, raindrops, axle grease, vermicelli, liverwurst slices and slices of it. And I'll tell no one why. After I had put everything down, I suddenly went home and chopped the baby to pieces. Un acte gratuit pour vous, cher monsieur si bien coupe en tranches. How a man can wander about all day on an empty belly, and even get an erection once in a while, is one of those mysteries which are too easily explained by the anatomists of the soul. On a Sunday afternoon, when the shutters are down and the proletariat possesses the street in a kind of dumb torpor, there are certain thoroughfares which remind one of nothing less than a big chancrous cock laid open longitudinally. And it is just these highways, the Rue Saint-Denis, for instance, or the Faubourg du Temple, which attract one irresistibly, much as in the old days, around Union Square or the upper reaches of the Bowery, one was drawn to the dime museums where in the show windows there were displayed wax reproductions of various organs of the body, eaten away by syphilis and other venereal diseases. The city sprouts out like a huge organism diseased in every part, the beautiful thoroughfares only a little less repulsive because they have been drained of their pus. At the site Nordier, somewhere near the Place du Combat, I pause a few minutes to drink in the full squalor of the scene. It is a rectangular court like many another which one glimpses through the low passageways that flank the old arteries of Paris. In the middle of the court is a clump of decrepit buildings which have so rotted away that they have collapsed on one another and formed a sort of intestinal embrace. The ground is uneven, the flagging slippery with slime, a sort of human dump heap which has been filled in with cinders and dry garbage. The sun is setting fast. The Colors die. They shift from purple to dried blood, from nacre to bistre, from cool dead greys to pigeon shit. Here and there a lopsided monster stands in the window, blinking like an owl. There is the shrill squawk of children, with pale faces and bony limbs, rickety little urchins marked with the forceps. A fetid odor seeps from the walls, the odor of a mildewed mattress. Europe medieval, grotesque, monstrous, a symphony in B-moll. Directly across the street the Cine Combat offers its distinguished clientele metropolis. Coming away my mind reverts to a book that I was reading only the other day. The town was a shambles, corpses, mangled by butchers and stripped by plunderers, lay thick. In the streets, wolves sneaked from the suburbs to eat them, the Black Death and other plagues crept in to keep them company, and the English came marching on, the while the dance macabre whirled about the tombs in all the cemeteries. Paris during the days of Charles the Silly. A lovely book. Refreshing, appetizing. I'm still enchanted by it. About the patrons and prodromes of the Renaissance I know little, but Madame Pimpernel, La Belle Boulanger, and Maître Jehan. Crapaud, I Orfèvre, these occupy my spare thoughts still. Not forgetting Rodin, the evil genius of the wandering Jew, who practiced his nefarious ways until the day when he was enflamed and outwitted by the octoroon. Cecily, sitting in the Square du Temple, musing over the doings of the horse knackers led by Jean Caboche, I have thought long and ruefully over the sad fate of Charles the Silly, a half-wit, who prowled about the halls of his Hotel St. Paul, garbed in the filthiest rags, eaten away by ulcers and vermin, gnawing a bone, when they flung him one, like a mangy dog. At the Rue des Lions I looked for the stones of the old menagerie where he once fed his pets. His only diversion, poor dolt, aside from those card games with his low-born companion, Odette de Champs Divers. It was a Sunday afternoon, much like this, when I first met Germaine. I was strolling along the Boulevard Beaumarchais, rich by 100 francs or so, which my wife had frantically cabled from America. There was a touch of spring in the air, a poisonous, malefic 82 spring that seemed to burst from the manholes. Night after night I had been coming back to this quarter, attracted by certain leprous streets which only revealed their sinister splendor when the light of day had oozed away and the whores commenced to take up their posts. The Rue Pasteur Wagner is one I recall in particular. Corner of the Rue Amelie which hides behind the boulevard like a slumbering lizard. Here, at the neck of the bottle, so to speak, there was always a cluster of vultures who croaked and flapped their dirty wings, who reached out with sharp talons and plucked you into a doorway. Jolly, rapacious devils who didn't even give you time to button your pants. When it was over, led you into a little room off the street, a room without a window usually, and sitting on the edge of the bed with skirts tucked up gave you a quick inspection, spat on your cock, and placed it for you. While you washed yourself another one stood at the door and, holding her victim by one hand, watched nonchalantly as you gave the finishing touches to your toilet. Germaine was different. There was nothing to tell me so. From her appearance, nothing to distinguish her from the other Trollops who met each afternoon. An evening at the Café de l'Elephant. As I say, it was a spring day and the few francs my wife had scraped up to cable me were jingling in my pocket. I had a sort of vague premonition that I would not reach the Bastille without being taken in tow by one of these buzzards. Sauntering along the boulevard, I had noticed her verging towards me with that curious trot-about air of a whore, and the run-down heels and the cheap jewelry and the pasty look of their kind which the rouge only accentuates. It was not difficult to come to terms with her. We sat in the back of the little tobacco called L'Elephant and talked it over quickly. In a few minutes we were in a 5-franc room on the Rue Amelot, the curtains drawn and the covers thrown back. She didn't rush things, Germaine. She sat on the bidet soaping herself and talked to me pleasantly about this and that. She liked the knickerbockers I was wearing. Très chic, she thought. They were once, but I had worn the seat out of them. Fortunately the jacket covered my ass. As she stood up to dry herself, still talking to me pleasantly, suddenly she dropped the towel and, advancing towards me leisurely, she commenced rubbing her pussy affectionately, stroking it with her 2 hands, caressing it, patting it, patting it. There was something about her eloquence at that moment, and the way she thrust that rosebush under my nose which remains unforgettable. She spoke of it as if it were some extraneous object which she had acquired at great cost, an object whose value had increased with time and which now she prized above everything in the world. Her words imbued it with a peculiar fragrance. It was no longer just her private organ, but a treasure, a magic, potent treasure, a God-given thing, and none the less so because she traded it day in and day out for a few pieces of silver. As she flung herself on the bed, with legs spread wide apart, she cupped it with her hands and stroked it some more, murmuring all the while in that hoarse, cracked voice of hers that it was good, beautiful, a treasure, a little treasure. And it was good, that little pussy of hers. That Sunday afternoon, with its poisonous breath of spring in the air, everything clicked again. As we stepped out of the hotel, I looked her over again in the harsh light of day, and I saw clearly what a whore she was. The gold teeth, the geranium in her hat, the run-down heels, etc., etc. Even the fact that she had wormed a dinner out of me and cigarettes and taxi hadn't the least disturbing effect upon me. I encouraged it, in fact. I liked her so well that after dinner we went back to the hotel again and took another shot at it. For love, this time. And again. That big, bushy thing of hers worked its bloom and magic. It began to have an independent existence for me too. There was Germaine and there was that rosebush of hers. I liked them separately and I liked them together. As I say, she was different, Germaine. Later, when she discovered my true circumstances, she treated me nobly, blew me to drinks, gave me credit, pawned my things, introduced me to her friends, and so on. She even apologized for not lending me money, which I understood quite well after her macquareau had been pointed out to me. Night after night I walked down the Boulevard Beaumarchais to the little tobacco where they all congregated, and I waited for her to stroll in and give me a few minutes of her precious time. When, some time later, I came to write about Claude, it was not Claude that I was thinking of, but Germain. All the men she's been with and now. You, just you, and barges going by, masts and hulls, the whole damned current of life flowing through you, through her, through all the guys behind you and after you, the flowers and the birds and the sun streaming in and the fragrance of it choking you, annihilating you. That was for Germain. Claude was not the same, though I admired her tremendously. I even thought for a while that I loved her. Claude had a soul and a conscience, she had refinement, too, which is bad in a whore. Claude always imparted a feeling of sadness. She left the impression, unwittingly, of course, that you were just one more added to the stream which fate had ordained to destroy her. Unwittingly, I say, because Claude was the last person in the world who would consciously create such an image in one's mind. She was too delicate, too sensitive for that. At bottom, Claude was just a good French girl of average breed and intelligence whom life had tricked somehow. Something in her there was which was not tough enough to withstand the shock of daily experience. For her were meant those terrible words of Louis Philippe. And a night comes when all is over, when so many jaws have closed upon us that we no longer have the strength to stand, and our meat hangs upon our bodies, as though it had been masticated 84 by every mouth. Germain, on the other hand, was a whore from the cradle. She was thoroughly satisfied with her role, enjoyed it in fact, except when her stomach pinched, or her shoes gave out, little surface things of no account, nothing that ate into her soul, nothing that created torment. Ennui. 85. That was the worst she ever felt. Days there were, no doubt, when she had a belly full, as we say. But no more than that. Most of the time she enjoyed it or gave the illusion of enjoying it. It made a difference, of course, whom she went with or came with. But the principal thing was a man. A man. That was what she craved. A man with something between his legs that could tickle her, that could make her writhe in ecstasy, make her grab that bushy twat of hers with both hands and rub it joyfully, boastfully, proudly, with a sense of connection, a sense of life. That was the only place where she experienced any life, down there where she clutched herself with both hands. Germain was a whore all the way through, even down to her good heart. Her whore's heart, which is not really a good heart but a lazy one, an indifferent, flaccid heart that can be touched for a moment, a heart without reference to any fixed point within, a big, flaccid whore's heart that can detach itself for a moment from its true center. However vile and circumscribed was that world which she had created for herself, nevertheless she functioned in it superbly. And that in itself is a tonic thing. When, after we had become well acquainted, her companions would twit me, saying that I was in love with Germain, a situation almost inconceivable to them, I would say, sure, I'm in love with her. And what's more, I'm going to be faithful to her. A lie, of course, because I could no more think of loving Germain than I could think of loving a spider, and if I was faithful, it was not to Germain but to that bushy thing she carried between her legs. Whenever I looked at another woman I thought immediately of Germain, of that flaming bush which she had left in my mind and which seemed imperishable. It gave me pleasure to sit on the terrace of the little tabac and observe her as she plied her trade, observe her as she resorted to the same grimaces, the same tricks, with others as she had with me. She's doing her job. That's how I felt about it, and it was with approbation that I regarded her transactions. Later, when I had taken up with Claude, and I saw her night after night sitting in her accustomed place, her round little buttocks chubbily ensconced in the plush settee, I felt a sort of inexpressible rebellion towards her, a whore, it seemed to me, had no right to be sitting there like a lady, waiting timidly for someone to approach, and all the while abstemiously 88 sipping her chocolate. Germaine was a hustler. She didn't wait for you to come to her, she went out and grabbed you. I remember so well the holes in her stockings, and the torn ragged shoes. I remember too how she stood at the bar and with blind, courageous defiance threw a strong drink down her stomach and marched out again. A hustler. Perhaps it wasn't so pleasant to smell that boozy breath of hers, that breath compounded of weak coffee, cognac, aperitifs, Pernod's and all the other stuff she guzzled between times, what to warm herself and what to summon up strength and courage, but the fire of it penetrated her, it glowed down there between her legs where women ought to glow, and there was established that circuit which makes one feel the earth under his legs again. When she lay there with her legs apart and moaning, even if she did moan that way for any and everybody, it was good. It was a proper show of feeling. She didn't stare up at the ceiling with a vacant look or count the bed bugs on the wallpaper, she kept her mind on her business. She talked about the things a man wants to hear when he's climbing over a woman. Whereas Claude, well, with Claude there was always a certain delicacy, even when she got under the sheets with you. And her delicacy offended me. Who wants a delicate whore? Claude would even ask you to turn your face away when she squatted over the bidet. All wrong. A man, when he's burning up with passion, wants to see things, he wants to see everything, even how they make water. And while it's all very nice to know that a woman has a mind, literature coming from the cold corpse of a whore is the last thing to be served in bed. Germaine had the right idea, she was ignorant and lusty, she put her heart and soul into her work. She was a whore all the way through, and that was her virtue. Easter came in like a frozen hare, but it was fairly warm in bed. Today it is lovely again, and along the Champs-Élysées at twilight it is like an outdoor seraglio choked with dark-eyed houris. The trees are in full foliage and of a verdure so pure, so rich, that it seems as though they were still wet and glistening with dew. From the Palais du Louvre to the Étoile it is like a piece of music for the pianoforte. For 5 days I have not touched the typewriter nor looked at a book, nor have I had a single idea in my head except to go to the American Express. At 9 this morning I was there, just as the doors were being opened, and again at 1 o'clock. No news. At 4:30 I dash out of the hotel, resolved to make a last-minute stab at it. Just as I turn the corner I brush against Walter Patch. Since he doesn't recognize me, and since I have nothing to say to him, I make no attempt to arrest him. Later, when I am stretching my legs in the Tuileries, his figure reverts to mind. He was a little stooped, pensive, with a sort of serene yet reserved smile on his face. I wonder, as I look up at this softly enameled sky, so faintly tinted, which does not bulge today with heavy rain clouds but smiles like a piece of old china, I wonder what goes on in the mind of this man who translated the 4 thick volumes of the history of art when he takes in this blissful cosmos with his drooping I. Along the Champs-Élysées, ideas pouring from me like sweat. I ought to be rich enough to have a secretary to whom I could dictate as I walk. Because my best thoughts always come when I am away from the machine. Walking along the Champs-Élysées, I keep thinking of my really superb health. When I say health, I mean optimism, to be truthful. Incurably optimistic. Still have one foot in the 19th century. I'm a bit retarded, like most Americans. Carl finds it disgusting, this optimism. I have only to talk about a meal, he says, and you're radiant. It's a fact. The mere thought of a meal, another meal, rejuvenates me. A meal. That means something. To go on a few solid hours of work, an erection possibly. I don't deny it. I have health, good, solid, animal health. The only thing that stands between me and a future is a meal, another meal. As for Carl, he's not himself these days. He's upset, his nerves are jangled. He says he's ill, and I believe him, but I don't feel badly about it. I can't. In fact, it makes me laugh. And that offends him, of course. Everything wounds him: my laughter, my hunger, my persistence, my insouciance, 91 everything. One day he wants to blow his brains out because he can't stand this lousy hole of a Europe anymore. The next day he talks of going to Arizona where they look you square in the eye. Do it. I say. Do one thing or the other, you bastard, but don't try to cloud my healthy eye with your melancholy breath. But that's just it. In Europe one gets used to doing nothing. You sit on your ass and whine all day. You get contaminated. You rot. Fundamentally Carl is a snob, an aristocratic little prick who lives in a dementia precox kingdom all his own. I hate Paris. He whines. All these stupid people playing cards all day, look at them. And this writing. What's the use of putting words together? I can be a writer without writing. Can't I? What does it prove if I write a book? What do we want with books? Anyway? There are too many books already. My eye, but I've been all over that ground years and years ago. I've lived out my melancholy youth. I don't give a fuck anymore what's behind me. Or what's ahead of me. I'm healthy. Incurably healthy. No sorrows, no regrets. No past, no future. The present is enough for me. Day by day. Today. Le bel aujourd'hui. He has one day a week off, Carl, and on that day he's more miserable, if you can imagine it, than on any other day of the week. Though he professes to despise food, the only way he seems to enjoy himself on his day off is to order a big spread. Perhaps he does it for my benefit, I don't know, and I don't ask. If he chooses to add martyrdom to his list of vices, let him, it's okay with me. Anyway, last Tuesday, after squandering what he had on a big spread, he steers me to the Dome, the last place in the world I would seek on my day off. But one not only gets acquiescent 93 here, one gets supine. Standing at the Dome bar is Marlowe, soused to the ears. He's been on a bender, as he calls it, for the last 5 days. That means a continuous drunk. A peregrination from one bar to another, day and night without interruption, and finally a layoff at the American hospital. Marlowe's bony emaciated face is nothing but a skull perforated by two deep sockets in which there are buried a pair of dead clams. His back is covered with sawdust. He has just had a little snooze in the water closet. In his coat pocket are the proofs for the next issue of his review. He was on his way to the printer with the proofs, it seems, when someone inveigled him to have a drink. He talks about it as though it happened months ago. He takes out the proofs and spreads them over the bar. They are full of coffee stains and dried spittle. He tries to read a poem which he had written in Greek, but the proofs are undecipherable. Then he decides to deliver a speech in French. But the gerund puts a stop to it. Marlowe is piqued. His one ambition is to talk a French which even the garçon will understand. Of Old French he is a master. Of the surrealists he has made excellent translations, but to say a simple thing like "get the hell out of here, you old prick," that is beyond him. Nobody understands Marlowe's French, not even the whores. For that matter, it's difficult enough to understand his English when he's under the weather. He blabbers and spits like a confirmed stutterer, no sequence to his phrases. You pay. That's one thing he manages to get out clearly. Even if he is fried to the hat, some fine preservative instinct always warns Marlowe when it is time to act. If there is any doubt in his mind as to how the drinks are going to be paid, he will be sure to put on a stunt. The usual one is to pretend that he is going blind. Carl knows all his tricks by now, and so when Marlowe suddenly claps his hands to his temples and begins to act it out, Carl gives him a boot in the ass and says, "Come out of it, you sap. You don't have to do that with me." Whether it is a cunning piece of revenge or not, I don't know, but at any rate Marlowe is paying Carl back in good coin. Leaning over us confidentially, he relates in a hoarse, croaking voice a piece of gossip which he picked up in the course of his peregrinations from bar to bar. Carl looks up in amazement. He's pale under the gills. Marlowe repeats the story with variations. Each time Carl wilts a little more. But that's impossible. He finally blurts out. "No, it ain't," croaks Marlowe. "You're gonna lose your job." I got it straight. Carl looks at me in despair. Is he shitting me, that bastard? He murmurs in my ear. And then aloud, "What am I going to do now? I'll never find another job. It took me a year to land this one." This, apparently, is all that Marlowe has been waiting to hear. At last he has found someone worse off than himself. They be hard times, he croaks. And his bony skull glows with a cold, electric fire. Leaving the dome, Marlowe explains between hiccups that he's got to return to San Francisco. He seems genuinely touched now by Carl's helplessness. He proposes that Carl and I take over the review during his absence. "I can trust you, Carl," he says. And then suddenly he gets an attack, a real one this time. He almost collapses in the gutter. We haul him to a bistro at the Boulevard Edgar Quinet and sit him down. This time he's really got it, a blinding headache that makes him squeal and grunt and rock himself to and fro like a dumb brute that's been struck by a sledgehammer. We spill a couple of Fernet Brancas down his throat, lay him out on the bench and cover his eyes with his muffler. He lies there groaning. In a little while we hear him snoring. What about his proposition? says Carl. Should we take it up? He says he'll give me 1,000 francs. When he comes back. I know he won't, but what about it? He looks at Marlowe sprawled out on the bench, lifts the muffler from his eyes, and puts it back. Again. Suddenly a mischievous grin lights up his face. Listen, Joe, he says, beckoning me to move closer, we'll take him up on it. We'll take his lousy review over and we'll fuck him good and proper. What do you mean by that? Why, we'll throw out all the other contributors and we'll fill it with our own shit, that's what? Yeah, but what kind of shit? Any kind, he won't be able to do anything about it. We'll fuck him good and proper. One good number and after that the magazine will be finished. Are you game, Joe? Grinning and chuckling we lift Marlowe to his feet and haul him to Carl's room. When we turn on the lights there's a woman in the bed waiting for Carl. I forgot all about her, says Carl. We turn the cunt loose and shove Marlowe into bed. In a minute or so there's a knock at the door. It's Van Norden. He's all aflutter. Lost a plate of false teeth at the Bal Negra, he thinks. Anyway, we get to bed, the four of us. Marlowe stinks like a smoked fish. In the morning Marlowe and Van Norden leave to search for the false teeth. Marlowe is blubbering. He imagines they are his teeth. It is my last dinner at the dramatist's home. They have just rented a new piano, a concert grand. I meet Sylvester coming out of the florist's with a rubber plant in his arms. He asks me if I would carry it for him while he goes for the cigars. One by one I've fucked myself out of all these free meals, which I had planned so carefully. One by one the husbands turn against me. Or the wives. As I walk along with the rubber plant in my arms I think of that night a few months back when the idea first occurred to me. I was sitting on a bench near the coupole, fingering the wedding ring which I had tried to pawn off on a garçon at the Dome. He had offered me 6 francs for it. And I was in a rage about it. But the belly was getting the upper hand. Ever since I left Mona I had worn the ring on my pinky. It was so much a part of me that it had never occurred to me to sell it. It was one of those orange blossom affairs in white gold. Worth $1.50 once, maybe more. For 3 years we went along without a wedding ring and then one day, when I was going to the pier to meet Mona I happened to pass a jewelry window on Maiden Lane and the whole window was staffed with wedding rings. When I got to the pier Mona was not to be seen. I waited for the last passenger to descend the gangplank, but no Mona. Finally I asked to be shown the passenger list. Her name was not on it. I slipped the wedding ring on my pinky and there it stayed. Once I left it in a public bath, but then I got it back again. One of the orange blossoms had fallen off. Anyway, I was sitting there on the bench with my head down, twiddling the ring, when suddenly someone clapped me on the back. To make it brief, I got a meal. And a few francs besides. And then it occurred to me, like a flash, that no one would refuse a man a meal if only he had the courage to demand it. I went immediately to a cafe and wrote a dozen letters. Would you let me have dinner with you once a week? Tell me what day is most convenient for you. It worked like a charm. I was not only fed, I was feasted. Every night. I went home drunk. They couldn't do enough for me, these generous ones. A weak souls. What happened to me between times was none of their affair. Now end. Then the thoughtful ones presented me with cigarettes, or a little pin.